Arabia extended demand. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Newsroom. I'm your host, Umar Khalid. But today is the 8th of February 2022. And these are the stories that we'll be discussing during the course of the show. We'll begin, ladies and gentlemen, with the latest as far as the Ukraine crisis is concerned. We'll be talking about that. We'll be talking about the different tensions that are present between the different countries, the different partners that of course, are part of this crisis, whether it be European Union, whether it be Russia, whether it be United States of America. This is going to be our leading segment, ladies and gentlemen, the crisis in Ukraine. Our second segment, ladies and gentlemen, concerns the visit of the Saudi Interior Minister, Prince Abdul Aziz bin Saud bin Naif, who was here on a day-long visit. He met with the President, with the Prime Minister, with the Interior Minister, and a lot of important details were discussed between the two leaders as far as different avenues of cooperation are concerned. This is going to be our second segment of the day, ladies and gentlemen. Then we'll be talking about the funeral prayer that has been held for a 5-year-old boy in Morocco, ladies and gentlemen, who fell down a well, and it prompted large-scale but ultimately unsuccessful rescue attempts. 5 days of searching for this boy in Morocco, and ultimately he was found to be dead. And huge mourning across the world, including from the different segments of the West as well. Of course, those mournings, those outpourings have been coming from all across the world. We are, in fact, together as far as grief is concerned, and this is just one example. Then we'll be talking about advances in scientific technology that have revealed that the world's glaciers contain significantly less ice than previously thought. This is a study that was published in Nature Geoscience. This revised estimate reduces the global sea level rise by 3 inches if all glaciers were to melt. This is an important, interesting study, and we'll be discussing with that with you in a very short time. And then finally, we'll be talking about the latest as far as COVID-19 is concerned. Let's begin, ladies and gentlemen, with our first segment. And our first segment, ladies and gentlemen, concerns the Ukraine crisis, what is happening in Ukraine, the tension that exists between the important players in the world, whether it be the US, Russia, or the European Union. More in the following report.
The escalating crisis on Russia-Ukraine border has prompted security experts to call the Ukraine crisis as the most dangerous moment for the security in Europe after the end of the Cold War. In a bout of diplomacy across 2 continents, French President Emmanuel Macron embarked on shuttle diplomacy mission to Moscow in his bid to de-escalate the Ukraine crisis. After 5 hours of marathon talks at Kremlin, French President warned that the two sides needed to work quickly to avoid risk of an escalation. There were some signs of progress in the talks as Russian President Vladimir Putin hinted at the possibility of considering a number of French president's proposals in order to lay a foundation for further steps. There hasn't been any breakthrough as Russian reservations regarding NATO's open door policy have been denounced, and Russian President Putin blasted NATO's membership policy by stating that it only benefits the US. Amid growing Western fears of a Russian invasion, US President Joe Biden has vowed to shut down a key Russian gas pipeline to Germany if Moscow invades Ukraine. According to Pentagon spokesman John Kirby, Russia has more than 70% of the troops it would need to launch an attack on Ukraine. The world cannot grapple with further chaos and instability, so geopolitical ambitions have to be balanced by diplomacy and deterrence by all stakeholders.
Now, of course, we've been joined by 2 very important guests to talk about this emerging issue that is changing with every passing day. In the studios, we've been joined by Syed Muhammad Ali. He's the Director of Strategic Affairs of CAS. Thank you very much, Ali, to have joined us. Pleasure. In the online, in fact, on Skype, we've been joined by Tom O'Connor. Tom is a senior foreign policy writer for Newsweek. Tom, thank you very much to have joined us. It's the first time that we'll be interacting, so all the very best, and we hope that we'll come up to your standards. Let's begin with you, Ali. Russia, European Union, Ukraine, there is a tangled relationship between all of these important parties since quite some time, all over the possible incursion into Ukraine by Russia because of an increased troop maintenance on the border along with Belarus. What, in your point of view, is the truth behind it all?
Thank you, Umar, for a very important topic and allowing me to share my perspective on it. Basically, it can be seen in three perspectives. One is the great power politics that is playing out between the status quo superpower, the United States, and the resurgent Russia, and also partly the rising China. How this great power contest is playing out on the world stage. That's one perspective. The other context is the geopolitics within Europe, in which Russia wants to reduce American influence within Europe and also threaten Europe in a manner that siding with US or depending on Washington for its security interests is not in the interest of Europe. And the third is a very interesting and complex interplay between geoeconomics and geopolitics. The Putin's ambition is to reassert itself that it has risen and it is confident and it can challenge American supremacy and influence within Europe. And it has a geopolitical context. In contrast, what Mr. Biden has done by meeting the German leadership and also encouraging the French leadership to meet Mr. Putin is a two-pronged strategy. They have resisted the temptation to escalate the tensions in kinetic manner through hard power. They have not deployed anything on the territory of Ukraine.
Although what they are saying, in fact,
Yeah.
is sanctions in case Russia invades Ukraine.
So they want to, instead of risking direct hostility and confrontation between two leading nuclear powers, they are using asymmetrical warfare in the context of exploiting the economic interests of Russia, because they earn lion's share of their earning by selling their energy exports to Europe. So if that supply is hurt, which is what we heard from the press conference yesterday between the US and German leadership, then that is the harm, that is the real question, whether Mr. Putin values the geopolitical gain in Ukraine in return for a huge economic cost that US and Western Europe could threaten it.
All right. Tom, is Russia ready to bear the economic cost in case there is an invasion and in case there are sanctions that are put on Russia that will include, as per Mr. Joe Biden, the suspension of all activity on the Nord 2 pipeline? That also, what is the US intention as far as this whole scenario is concerned? Will it continue to move forward as far as including Ukraine in NATO? What's your take on these two?
Well, to answer the second question first, I do think that there has been no timeline set. There's been no stated intention other than just the actual words on paper and rhetorically to include Ukraine in NATO. I think that there doesn't seem to be much of a desire to get that process started anytime soon. I think this is really more about principles. And it's important because I think that both the U.S. and NATO both realize that adding Ukraine into NATO would make these sort of crises far worse, because then the U.S. and NATO allies will be obligated to act. And of course, there is some issues as far as Ukraine's qualifications. They want more reforms, and there hasn't really been any sort of clear set process or timeline for that to happen. So that's important to remember. At the same time, of course, saying that there has been no rejection of Ukraine's membership, and the U.S. and NATO allies have so far refused to preclude its membership. As to Russia's preparation in face of potential severe economic consequences, as the Biden administration has said, I do believe that these consequences would impose severe pain on Russia's economy. Russia's economy is far smaller than its military in relation to other powers. It's got the largest military in Europe. At the same time, it's got a smaller economy than Italy. So the economy means a lot to Russia, and also its integration with the West. But at the same time, there's also a new element that's emerged over the past few years, and we saw it just recently with President Putin's visit to China, and that's the fact that Russia has formed somewhat of an informal economic alliance with China, and that could be activated in the event of a severe Western movement to cut Russia off from essentially the Western economic world. So I think that Russia now enjoys a buffer zone it never did before, and I think this certainly plays into the Kremlin's calculus.
But Tom, what I mean to understand as well is from day one, the US and its allies have been saying that Russia is going to invade Ukraine. From day one, Russia has been denying that very fact, saying it does not want to invade Ukraine. What, in your point of view, is the reality?
Well, I think Russia does not want to invade Ukraine. I think that it's come clear through just various experts and officials who have spoken that this is not the desired outcome for Moscow. But the desired outcome is a re-understanding of the Eastern European security architecture, one that was drawn up at the end of the Cold War after the collapse of the Soviet Union, at a time when Russia viewed itself and was viewed as weak, essentially, because it had essentially lost the Cold War, per se, in the Western mentality, and in the U.S. and other parts of the West, that was seen as an absolute victory, an objective victory for the NATO side of that conflict. But for Russia, it was seen as a humiliation. I think that 30 years later now, and 2 decades under Vladimir Putin, there's a desire to reassert Russia's role in that and to build a more inclusive security architecture. That's not necessarily a bad thing. Of course, the Russian side and the NATO side are still worlds apart on what that new world would look like, that new security order would look like. But I think that that's certainly what Russia wants, more so than to launch a large-scale invasion or even a large-scale attack on Ukraine, which Russia knows would impose serious costs, even with the military imbalance that far favors Russia.
That's a very interesting point that I'll take up with Ali. Ali, new security order. Is there a new global security order in the pipeline that is in the making with Russia, China on one side and maybe US and its allies on the other?
I think it's an excellent question because not just the security order, the entire world order, which have sub-orders, economic order, political order, security order. These are subsets of the world order. I think this presents, Ukraine crisis presents a very critical test of between the contest, the great power contest of status quo power, which is the United States, and the anti-status quo powers, which are Russia and China. And I see very clearly 2 emerging trends. One is that we should not see Ukraine in isolation and only a European issue. It has galvanized Europe and made them security conscious, and they have realized that by contesting China in Asia Pacific, they might actually be actually at the cost of their own regional security. So what I am seeing as a geopolitical context is that China is being contested or contained by US in the Asia Pacific region, whereas Russia is challenging the US influence in European and Atlantic theaters. So I see a convergence of Beijing and Moscow's geopolitical grand strategies in the context that both have a common interest, which is to shape the world order into a multipolar world order.
All right.
So they have a common interest here.
Who does this suit, this multipolar order?
I think multipolar order suits both China and Russia because both of them will join hands and synergize the Chinese wealth and the immense Russian hard power to challenge the US supremacy in a manner that will create serious challenges for US in both Asia Pacific, and it will be a huge challenge to the Asia Pacific or the US so-called Indo-Pacific strategy, because now the US strategic thinkers and planners will be really worried that they cannot concentrate their land, air, sea and strategic capabilities mainly towards the Asia Pacific, because they have to consider the growing challenge from Russia, and by posturing their capabilities in Atlantic and Mediterranean Sea as well. So this is a huge challenge to the US, and I think it will also pose a huge challenge to the European politics and future,
now,
because can they depend on America
exactly
or not?
That is very important. European politics. Tom, when we talk of Europe, this recent, of course, media talk that emanated after the meeting between Joe Biden and Mr. Scholz, there was a little bit of hesitation from the German Chancellor as far as a suspension of the Nord 2 pipeline is concerned. There was not an open, admission from the German side whether there will be, in fact, a suspension from the German side, or will Germany be on the same side as the US if in case Russia does invade Ukraine. Is, in your point of view, there going to be a split within the European Union if Russia invades Ukraine?
Well, I think that if we talk about the larger geopolitical context surrounding this crisis, I certainly think it's very important to talk about the Russia-China bloc, which has emerged over recent years. And I think that Germany is in a very interesting position. In recent years, and going back a few years even before that, but especially now, Germany has sought to forge a sort of third track foreign policy, a more independent track that doesn't necessarily align it 100% with the NATO side of this. And it doesn't mean that Germany isn't an important part of NATO, not an important part of the European Union. Of course it is. And in fact, its economy is essential. And because it's so powerful, Germany's economy, and its soft power in many parts of the world, it's able to sort of wield that independent clout from its other allies. And I think Germany has not wanted to take the more aggressive path. I think it's wanted to sort of hedge its position a bit when it comes to the Russia crisis specifically, and broader also, I think, when it comes to China as well. And I think Germany's saying right now that this is on the table, this Nord Stream pipeline project. But at the same time, we don't want to send weapons to Ukraine. We don't want to jump the gun here. We want to see how this thing plays out. And I think the German position is just that. Now, if push comes to shove and there is some sort of invasion, I don't think it's likely that Germany will completely split with its allies. I think that being part of that alliance means that Germany has some certain obligations, of course, and some sort of alignment. But I think Germany doesn't want to, as I said earlier, sort of jump the gun, get ahead of the story right now. It wants to ensure that it isn't seen as making any provocative moves or statements.
Now, Tom, you talked of weaponization. Isn't Latvia and one or two more countries, aren't they being weaponized by the West as we speak? Haven't they already been weaponized? Hasn't the United Kingdom and other countries talked about weaponizing Ukraine as well? Don't you feel there's going to be a shift as far as the defense strategies of the different countries in the region are concerned, whether there is an incursion or not?
Sure. Well, I think that, you talked earlier about a divisions within NATO and the European Union. I think that as far as they exist, you'll see that between countries such as Poland and the Baltic states. That's one side of it. On the other side, Germany and other countries more in Western Europe, as far as their willingness to sort of engage Russia. Obviously, the countries in the Baltic region, Poland, with their experience with Russia, they've shown far more enthusiasm and a larger appetite for weapons, for mobilization of foreign troops. Their experiences dictate that sort of strategy as it stands right now. At the same time, this strategy is if we go back to 2014, and that's where the West really starts the beginning of this history of this conflict with the original outbreak of unrest in Ukraine, the annexation of Crimea, whereas Russia would point to the beginning of this crisis as 1991, the fall of the Soviet Union, as I was discussing earlier, and sort of when this order began. And even after that, 2002, the end of the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty, and then, of course, even in 2019, the end of the INF, Intermediate Nuclear Ranges Forces Treaty. This to Russia has been the degradation of what they see as their security interests in Europe. And I think that that they very much view the sending troops to the Baltic states, the deployment of missile systems in places like Poland and Romania as the sort of things that have provoked this crisis. And that's of course Russia's point of view on this. The U.S. sees it as a defensive alliance, and they see this as necessary for maintaining what has long been a U.S.-led world order since the end of the Cold War. But of course, this is a changing world now. This is a different world we live in.
That is a changing world, definitely. But Ali, in this changing world, there have been other countries who are trying to pacify or talk to Russia about it. Macron was there, and he talked to Mr. Putin, but no positive outcome came out of it. Before the meeting, Putin seemed to be very optimistic and very hype. After that, there was this kind of a subdued response as far as Russia is concerned. Why is that so? What is going on? And if it's France, I mean, we know that France's re-election for president is also coming up. Is this more of a political move by France in your point of view, or is it really a genuine effort by some European countries to kind of find some kind of a stalemate?
I think it's very important. I mean, this security environment is not divorced from the very intense politics of Europe. And I noticed that Biden has shown the wisdom to allow and encourage Germany and France, two of the leading European powers, to take lead in this diplomatic effort in diffusing the tensions. So it means that they are tactful, Washington is tactful, and they recognize that Germany and France aspire to have greater influence in European security and politics, and let them play this role. That is one aspect. But quickly, there are 4 takeaways from this crisis. At the global level, I think the most important takeaway, as I earlier pointed out, is that US is facing for the first time a specter in the new Cold War, that it is facing both China and Russia in different theaters of the world. So it will not be able to concentrate only on China. So it's a breathing space and relief, a strategic relief to China. That it is also has a huge distraction in the form of the rising and more assertive Moscow, which is posturing very aggressively in Black Sea, in Mediterranean Sea, in Atlantic. It has revived its bomber flights and all that. The third aspect is the European politics. On a lighter note, one of the founders of NATO once said, the purpose of NATO is to keep the Americans in, the Germans down, and Russians out. So Americans have actually succeeded in reviving the relevance of NATO for European security.
All right.
However, the most important point is that Russia has tested the waters and it has signaled that it has risen, it is a revived power, and it is going to challenge American supremacy globally, but particularly in its sphere of influence. So I expect European powers, including those which are dependent for their security on the US, will show greater respect towards Moscow, and they'll be reluctant to engage in a direct confrontation with Washington.
Only time will tell, Ali. Final question, Tom, from you. And I'd like to quote Joseph Borrell, who is, of course, the European Union foreign policy chief. He said Europe is going through its most dangerous moment since the Cold War. What happens now? What are the possible scenarios in your point of view? Because in the very beginning you said there's the very least possibility that Russia might eventually invade Ukraine. Is it more, in your point of view, a pressure tactic by Russia? And if so, for which is the reason? Is it so that Ukraine does not enter the NATO, but that of course is something that the West is not really inclined towards? What is the end game in your point of view?
Well, it's difficult to say. I think that we're in a very precarious moment right now. I'd agree that it's a dangerous moment right now. It's sort of an inflection point right now when it comes to whether the U.S. and its NATO allies on one side and Russia on the other side, to some extent China as well because of the larger geopolitical context, but specifically when it comes to the two sides in Europe, or the West and Europe right now. What we're looking at is whether they can come to some sort of understanding, some sort of compromise, even just to begin the process of rewriting those rules or re-understanding, reinterpreting what the security order in Eastern Europe and Europe actually in general will look like. And I think that it's a very tall order. It's difficult to say whether that process will be successful. The scenarios in which it fails are myriad, and they go as far as invasion. They go as far as as far as they can go to doomsday scenarios. Now, I don't think we're there yet, of course, and I'm not sure we'll ever get to that point. But of course, Ukraine's at stake right now, and I think Russia genuinely does not want to engage in that sort of conflict. That doesn't mean it will not do it, because if Russia feels that it's not been respected and its interests have not been taken seriously by the West, they very well might want to show their military force and perhaps send a message as to what happens when Russia is not listened to. If we remember back, I believe it was 2018, when Russia and Vladimir Putin himself unveiled a series of new and advanced weapon systems that the world never seen before, capable of defeating all defenses. What he said, and this was related to missile defenses that the U.S. had installed in the region. This was in response to all the treaties that had fallen apart. What Vladimir Putin said was, you didn't listen to us then, and you will listen to us now. And I think that that's the sort of scenario we're in right now.
All right. Thank you very much, Tom O'Connor, Senior Foreign Policy Writer from Newsweek. And thank you very much, Syed Muhammad Ali, Director of Strategic Affairs from CAS, to have talked to us on this very important emerging issue that is the crisis in Ukraine. And I'm sure within the next 24 or 48 hours, something new is going to develop as well. Let's hope whatever development comes for the best, comes for the betterment of the region. Let's stay optimistic. That is all I have to say on that. Thank you very much to the both of you. Let's come to my second story, ladies and gentlemen, and that concerns the important relationship that exists between the Islamic Republic of Pakistan and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. We all know that the Saudi Interior Minister Prince Abdul Aziz bin Saud bin Naif was in Pakistan. He met with important personalities. More in the following report.
Pakistan and Saudi Arabia relations are marked by historical ties, mutual trust, cooperation and an abiding tradition of supporting each other. In a recent meeting held between the Saudi Arabian Interior Minister Prince Abdulaziz bin Saud and Prime Minister Imran Khan, the Premier thanked Saudi Arabia for its steadfast support to Pakistan, highlighting the financial budgetary support of $3 billion that Saudi Arabia extended to Pakistan and emphasized people-to-people public linkages with the kingdom. The Premier also lauded the vision of Prince Mohammed bin Salman to Saudi Arabia's progress and prosperity and his invaluable contribution to the abiding fraternal relations between the two countries. Condemning the recent militia attack, Prime Minister Imran Khan assured Pakistan's full support for the kingdom's security. He also acknowledged the positive contribution of Pakistanis in the development of the kingdom. Earlier, Saudi Interior Minister Prince Abdulaziz bin Saud held a meeting with Interior Minister Sheikh Rashid Ahmed and other senior officials. Interior Minister Sheikh Rashid Ahmed stated that Pakistan values its links with Saudi Arabia and that these ties are long-standing. 2 million Pakistanis working in Saudi Arabia were a valuable resource for the country. The minister expressed gratitude to the Saudi authorities for its concern for Pakistani workers, to which Prince Abdulaziz bin Saud noted that Pak-Saudi relations are based on mutual trust and brotherhood. Pak Army Chief in a meeting with Saudi dignitary discussed matters of regional issues and bilateral defense relations. Meanwhile, Pakistan and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia have reiterated the importance of further strengthening and diversifying bilateral cooperation in various areas of mutual interest.
And to talk more about the gamut of relationship between Pakistan and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, we've been joined by our guest Umar Karim. He's a research fellow with the Royal United Services Institute, London, otherwise known as RUSI. Umar, thank you very much to have joined us. Umar, this visit of the Saudi Interior Minister comes at an interesting and important point in the regional context. A lot of things are happening, whether it be in Afghanistan, whether it be whatever is happening in Ukraine, whether it be the new geostrategic dimensions of this new global order, this new multipolar order that is slowly and steadily developing. How important has this visit been in your point of view?
I think this is a very important visit, because the Interior Minister, Prince Abdulaziz bin Saud Al Naif, is also very close to the Saudi Crown Prince, who has been considered largely as the de facto ruler of Saudi Arabia. And he has been known to take messages from the Saudi Crown Prince and has delivered them to countries like Algeria and some other countries. So he not only is overseeing a very critical, you can say, institution within the Saudi kingdom, but he's also at large an envoy of the Saudi Crown Prince and a close confidant. So and he also must be delivering some very private messages from the Crown Prince to the Pakistani leadership. And also in terms of security cooperation and intelligence sharing, particularly in the domain of civilian institutions, because Saudi institutions have been developed in a different way till now. They have not been as, you can say, institutionally engineered as our institutions have been. So, of course, there can be cooperation in this specific domain as well. Overall, it's a very important visit, and it can, you can say, pave way for maybe a state visit of the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman to Pakistan.
Well, that is being expected as well. A lot of things were discussed during the different meetings that the Saudi Interior Minister held with our Prime Minister Imran Khan, with our President and with our Interior Minister Sheikh Rashid Ahmed Saab. I'll begin with, of course, the Prime Minister. Whether it be the vision of Prince Mohammed bin Salman for Saudi Arabia's progress, whether it be the prisoners that are languishing in Saudi jails, whether it be the other aspects of the cooperation between Pakistan and Saudi Arabia, these have been discussed in the meeting with him. When it comes to the prisoners, do you feel there is going to be some kind of a leeway as far as that is concerned?
I think that the issue of Pakistani prisoners in Saudi jails has been, you can say, discussed between the two sides, both on the leadership level. As you remember, Prime Minister Imran Khan has raised the issue personally, as well as on the institutional level. And we have seen some breakthrough in this regard as well. I do believe that from a Pakistani perspective, resolving the cases of these prisoners and their honorable release is a priority. So definitely, especially in the meetings with Interior Minister Sheikh Rashid Ahmed, this seems to be an agenda item. And also we see the religious affairs minister, he was also present there. So I think that a lot of these topics which fall in the domain of the religious affairs ministry as well as in the interior affairs ministry were discussed. And of course, Prince Abdulaziz bin Saud is the relevant person for these matters.
Omar, one of the other things that was also discussed was the support that the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia has always extended to Pakistan, especially in difficult times. How important has Saudi Arabia been as a friend as far as Pakistan is concerned during dire times?
Absolutely. I think Saudi Arabia has been one of the foremost supporters, backers, and friends of Pakistan, primarily in critical times. And the Saudi financial support has been critical for Pakistan in withstanding these critical movements, as we have seen in 2018. But even back in 1998, after the nuclear tests, we were under similar sort of pressure. So Saudi Arabia, in a way, has been consistent in this approach and in this partnership with regards to Pakistan. But of course, in return, Saudi Arabia also has political expectations, which I am sure that our leadership also understands. And because the relationship has a very personal dimension, so all these issues are also discussed between the leadership of the two sides. And the presence of Prince Abdulaziz here in this crucial time also also highlights this very fact that a personal relationship between the leaderships of two sides is very strong, is active, and they are holding negotiations, and they are deliberating on critical issues and exchanging views with each other.
Umar, when the Saudi Interior Minister met with the President Dr. Arif Alvi, in this meeting also our President thanked the Saudi leadership for being on Pakistan's side when it comes to the FATF or when it comes to Pakistan's stance on different issues in the OIC, and also for attending the extraordinary session of the Council of Foreign Ministers of the OIC in December last year. In all of these important matters, regional or international, that Pakistan highlights, how important has been the Saudi support?
I think Saudi Arabia has been, again, one of those critical allies that have backed Pakistan in these different international forums, as well as on crucial issues, of course, as much as they can, because as a country, they have their own liabilities and interests. But in case of, as you mentioned, the special OIC foreign ministers meeting, it was very clearly a Saudi participation boosted that meeting, and actually
it was a Saudi participation that boosted it. Kindly stay online with us, Umar. We've been joined by Faheem Al-Hamid. He's a Saudi journalist. Mr. Al-Hamid, thank you very much to have joined us. Mr. Al-Hamid, how important is this visit of the Saudi Interior Minister to Pakistan, and how will that lead to further cementing and consolidating the ties between our two brotherly countries?
Yes, thank you very much for having me, brother. In fact, the security relation between the two countries is very important, at the prevailing situation, of the geopolitics going on. around us, so either in the Middle East or in nearby neighboring Pakistan. I think this visit was very crucial, very important, and very, in a tight schedule. His Royal Highness, met the Prime Minister, the President, the Prime Minister, and he had very, comprehensive discussion with his counterpart, Mr. Sheikh Rashid. I would assume that, there would be a very important impact or positive impact of this visit on exchange of, information and combating terrorism, and also enhancing the relationship, which is, very important at this stage. Saudi Arabia and Pakistan has enjoyed very strategic relation in the business, investment, political, in the level of leadership. Now, with the Minister of Interior visiting Pakistan, I think it was a very milestone towards enhancing the cooperation in the Interior Ministry in every aspect, and especially in the security information.
Mr. Al-Hamid, also as far as the people-to-people contact is concerned, there are over 2 million Pakistanis who work in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Prince Abdulaziz also acknowledged the positive contribution of the Pakistanis in his kingdom as far as the resolve to work closely with the Pakistani side on all matters is concerned. And also there is this appreciation of the Pakistani side as well on the way the Saudi leadership has been taking care of the Pakistanis. How important is people-to-people contact in further cementing the bond between countries?
Brother, this is very, very important aspect of this relation. We go for G to G, government to government, leadership to leadership. It's very strategic. But as you mentioned, P2P, peoples to people is very important, and we realize how much the Pakistani nation, support to Haramain Sharifain, to cause of Islam, and to the affiliation of those people, 200 million, towards the Haramain Sharifain. As you mentioned, there is more than 2 million Pakistani expatriates living here honorably, and they are not only living honorably, they are participating, brother, in the enhancement and prosperity of Saudi Arabia and their people. So we cannot at all ignore their share in the prosperity of Saudi Arabia, either in a different scale, either labor scale or secretariat or executive level. So this people-to-people contact, which is remain long life. This is, the government change and, people change, but people-to-people contact remains forever.
Thank you very much, Mr. Faheem Al-Hamid, Saudi journalist, talking to us online and, of course, giving us more details as far as the relationship, the cooperation, the collaboration, the friendship that exists between the Kingdom and the Islamic Republic of Pakistan. Coming back to you, Omar, do you feel that, we talked about Prince Mohammed bin Salman, we talked about the importance of Saudi-Pakistani relationship in different contexts. When it comes to geostrategic relationship between the Kingdom and the Islamic Republic of Pakistan, how do you foresee further collaborations between our two brotherly countries?
I think that the collaboration in the geostrategic domain, particularly the security domain, has already been very strong. And from what I have been seeing and observing, it is becoming stronger and stronger. The Saudi defense forces, they are being trained in Pakistan. Of course, when they are being trained within Pakistan by Pakistani officers, that creates unique bonds. Then the Saudi Arabian National Guard has also been trained by Pakistan. Both leaderships, the Saudi and Pakistani leaderships, they have, you can say, a near unanimity of views when it comes to regional conflicts, regional issues, particularly the Houthi attacks on Saudi Arabia. Pakistan has strongly condemned them, and Pakistan has been one of those countries who have again and again stressed upon the importance of the sanctity of the Haramain al-Sharifain, and also the sovereignty and integrity of the Saudi kingdom. Additionally, Pakistan has been a member of the coalition maritime force that that works in terms of regulating maritime traffic and maritime threats within the Persian Gulf and the Arabian Sea. So there is also institutional coordination between the naval forces of Saudi Arabia and Pakistan, particularly in this domain. So from a geostrategic point of view, you can say that in addition to China, probably in this whole region, Pakistan is most close to Saudi Arabia, and both sides do understand, you can say, the political interests of each other and also the political sensitivities, and that's why at every crucial moment we have seen both sides standing with each other. And even though if there are certain, you can say, differences or a difference of opinion or a divergence of opinion, these they have not really impacted upon the larger nature or larger trajectory of the relationship. And as these visits personify that the relationship is quite is intact and is progressing again towards you can say, I will quote words of Prince Turki Al Faisal, the former Saudi intelligence chief, that this is one of the unique relationships in the world history where there is no formal pact that governs the trajectory or the dynamics of a relationship, but it works as an alliance between two nations.
Of course, it definitely works as an alliance between two nations, but more than an alliance, it is a friendship between two brotherly Islamic countries. That friendship that is going to only become stronger with the times. Thank you very much, Umar, Karim, to have joined us, to have talked to us about the different aspects of this relationship between the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and the Islamic Republic of Pakistan, and of course the visit of the Saudi Interior Minister, Prince Abdulaziz bin Saud Al bin Naif, who that was very important in this context as well. Let's come very quickly, ladies and gentlemen, to our last three stories. Let's first take you to Morocco, where the world in fact is mourning on the death of a 5-year-old boy. This 5-year-old boy died in a well, accidentally fell in this well, and despite the efforts of all the people in the neighborhood of his father, they could not take the boy out. There were some maybe the aspirations of people that he might come out alive, but then unfortunately the boy was found 5 days later and he passed away. Condolences for the parents came all the way from King Mohammed VI, Pope Francis, French President Emmanuel Macron, Dubai ruler Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum. Others, Egyptian and Senegalese football players, held a minute of silence on Sunday before the kickoff of the final of the Africa Cup of Nations. Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, of course, we've talked about him. He said that may Allah Almighty grant him a place in the tide of mercy and bless his family with patience and beauty. Ladies and gentlemen, when it comes to such facts, it's very important to note that the world gets together. The world has become a very small place to live in. In fact, we know whatever is happening around the world, and the fact that a tragedy like this happens puts the world in mourning and shocks the world. Let's hope that this is a lesson for so many others for not to repeat and to take extreme care of their children. But at the same time, what is happening in Yemen and Syria, where children are also dying of famine, also needs to be condoned and condemned by the entire world. Let's come to our next segment, ladies and gentlemen, and that concerns the world's glaciers, who, as per a report, hold less ice than thought previously. Now, scientists estimate that there is 20% less of glacial ice present, raising concerns for some communities that rely on seasonal melt. This report reduces the global sea level rise by 3 inches if all glaciers were to melt. Between 2000 and 2019, rivers of ice lost roughly 5.4 trillion tons. That is what this report says. Countries, it says, are already struggling with disappearing glaciers, whether it be Peru, whether it be the Asia's Himalayas, whether it be South America's Andean glaciers that contain roughly 20% less ice already. This is a huge cause of concern, especially when it comes to an issue such as climate change that is plaguing the entire world, including our country, Pakistan. We need to take care not only of other things, of the greenery across the world, but also of our glaciers, and be very concerned about that. And our last story, ladies and gentlemen, concerns COVID-19. Now, Dr. Faisal Sultan has said in a tweet, and I repeat, that over 2 million doses have have been given to Pakistanis of the COVID-19 vaccine very recently. He also has lauded the polio workers for their splendid efforts. He also promised that Pakistan is going to be polio-free by the year 2023. Vaccination, of course, he has said, is the only way to contain this deadly virus, and its widespread acceptance remains a worrying issue. This was said by Dr. Faisal Sultan, the Special Assistant to the Prime Minister on National Health Services, Regulation and Coordination. And it is due to the efforts of Dr. Faisal Sultan, the NCOC, that people understand what COVID-19 is all about, the importance of it, the importance of following the SOPs, and to get themselves vaccinated. And this is what is happening. Even door-to-door vaccination drives are happening across Pakistan, and this is indeed an effort that needs to be appreciated by all Pakistanis. It has been appreciated by the World Health Organization and other Western countries as well. With that, we come to an end of today's newsroom. We'll see you inshallah tomorrow with news stories and segments that pertain to us, you and Pakistan. In the meantime, kindly follow the SOPs, get yourselves vaccinated, and take care of yourselves and your loved ones, and not put them in an environment where there's more of a risk of getting the pandemic, getting the virus that is COVID-19. Allah Hafiz.